Golden State Media Concepts bring you Book Review Podcast, a haven for bookworms of all ages and the widest genres, from mystery to memoirs, romance to comedy, fantasy to sci-fi. If you love to read, this is a podcast for you. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Book Review Podcast.
Hello and welcome to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Sarah. It is Friday, not Tuesday, and I hope you've had a great week. Hope you have a good weekend coming up. Our week has just been... I don't think I've done anything of note since Tuesday's episode that I can think of. It's raining here, which is nice. We need the rain. We've been in a drought, so the rain is good. You know what? No, the best thing happened to me this week. We got a new dryer. Our landlord bought us a new dryer. The one that I think I mentioned that blew up a couple months ago. It didn't really blow up. That's melodramatic of me to say that, but we've been waiting for the new one to come in, and it came in and was installed on Tuesday or Wednesday, I think. And it's just beautiful because it has been so rainy that, you remember me doing laundry in a parking lot or drying my laundry in a parking lot a few weeks ago? I don't have to do that anymore. So yeah, it has been a really, really good week. I have a new tumble dryer. It's right in my kitchen and it works and I can dry clothes and I'm so happy now. I don't mind line drying, but when it's this humid and, it takes 3 days for things to dry, it makes laundry a very long process. So that's the excitement in my world for this week. And I hope you had something equally exciting, although maybe more exciting than a dryer. I mean, take your excitement where you can get it, but I know I sound a little weird, possibly unhinged in my excitement for a dryer, but that's neither here nor there. I have a returning guest this episode. I mentioned at the end of the last episode that Laury Egan is joining me again today. She's here to talk about her new novel, Once Upon an Island. This is her third visit to the podcast. If you would like to go back and listen to her first two episodes, those are episodes 118 and 247. So like I said, this is her third visit. She is here to talk about her newest novel, although she's had about 4 come out recently, and she'll talk a little bit more about those. But this one that we're talking about, for the most part, is called Once Upon an Island, and the description is as follows. A 16-year-old girl, Olivia, who feels guilty about her younger brother's death, her mother, Evelyn, a glamorous artist, Travis, the charismatic owner of the Pink Fancy Hotel, a mysterious Czechoslovakian widow, Sophia, a sojourn on St. Croix, a tropical island, 2 love affairs, secrets, Nazis, Ravensbrück concentration camp, conflict, jealousy, kindness, tenderness, a rescue, and a resurrection, all woven together in a haunting work of literary fiction set in 1966. And that is the description of Once Upon an Island. That gives you a lot of little sound bites, doesn't it? And yes, it tells you a lot, while keeping it short and simple. This does take place in 1966. It is inspired by some time that the author spent on St. Croix in 1966. And there's some inspirations that she'll talk about in the interview. It is a work of fiction. This is not completely based on that time, just some inspiration taken from that visit. But the main character, Olivia, is visiting St. Croix with her mother. They have a difficult relationship, as often happens with mothers and teenage daughters, but theirs is made more difficult by the death of Olivia's younger brother, Simon, many years prior, about 8 years prior to the beginning of the story, and the way that has affected both them as individuals and their relationship. Also, Olivia's relationship with her father, although this trip is with her mother. But they come to the island with different expectations, of course, and different understandings, and as characters do, they grow and change through a series of events, but it really is a bit of a coming-of-age story for Olivia, and because she is 16 and she does have some profound relationships on the island. One relationship, of course, with her mother, another relationship with the Czechoslovakian widow that's mentioned in the description, Sophia, and that definitely changes her, along with some other actual events that happen in addition to those relationships. So, coming of age, story of relationships. The island itself plays a major role. It is, in a sense, another character in the book. So, lots of good stuff going on in this story. And I'm going to turn it over now to Laury so she can tell you more about the book. Again, the book is called Once Upon an Island, and the author is Laury A. Egan.
Hi, Laury. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much, Sarah. It's nice to be back again.
Yeah, I should have said welcome back. I usually do. This is your third appearance on the podcast, which is very cool. For people who maybe haven't heard your first two interviews or maybe need a refresher, if you could share a little bit about yourself and maybe what you've been up to since I talked to you 2.5 years ago.
Well, I've been very fortunate to have several books published in the interim, just a combination of strange publishing schedules. So the one we're going to talk about today, Once Upon an Island, just came out in September. But prior to that, I had Wave in D Minor, or literary suspense, come out. And then we also had a young adult turnabout and a psychological suspense that would be a little bit more akin to the Ungodly Hour that we talked about the last time, and that's called Double Crossed. And then prior to that, The Swimmer, which is a literary work, which would be a little closer in feel to Once Upon an Island, in the sense that it's literary.
And I think we talked about this maybe a little bit last time that you were on. You tend to write across a range of genres, which is fun. How do you just kind of write by mood, or how does that work for you?
Well, I am unusual, you're right, in that I write for different audiences and I write different genres. This current one is more literary, and that's one mode that I use, but I'm very fascinated with psychological suspense, which a number of my books have been in that category. As far as what genre I pick or how the book comes out, usually it's a combination of either a what if plot that occurs to me, so I follow that into whatever realm that takes me, or sometimes I'm channeling a character and the character suggests the type of book that it's going to be. So those are the two most common reasons I go in one direction or the other. Sometimes it's setting, like Mykonos was for the Ungodly Hour. I really love that island, as I do Once Upon an Island, which is set in St. Croix, the Virgin Islands. So sometimes it's setting.
I'm going to jump in here and we're going to take our first break of the episode. When we come back, though, more about, of course, Once Upon an Island. So stay tuned. You're listening to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, and I'll be right back.
Golden State Media Concepts bring you the Bible Study Podcast. Reflect and journey the Bible as together we study God's Word and be inspired. Bible study made fun and informative for all ages. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Bible Study Podcast.
Welcome back to the GSMC Book Review Podcast. I am speaking today with author Laury A. Egan about her book, Once Upon an Island. Before the break, she was talking about what inspires her to write across different genres, how she decides or determines which genre she is going to write in next, and a lot of that sometimes is about setting. So I just wanted to put that into a bit more context so that my next comment makes more sense if you forgot what we were talking about before the break.
It's funny that the two that we've talked about most recently, The Ungodly Hour and Once Upon an Island, both take place on an island, but they're very different books. So can you give an overview of Once Upon an Island?
Sure. Once Upon an Island is set in 1966 and a little bit into 1967 on St. Croix, which is a U.S. Virgin Island. And the main character, Olivia, is 16 years old, and she's there with her mother, who is working on a portfolio for an exhibit on St. Thomas the following year. And they are not getting along so well, to tell you the truth. It's a typical mother-daughter kind of issue. And Olivia is also suffering from a trauma because she feels guilty that her younger brother, died one night under her auspices, so to speak, and she's never gotten over it, and she feels like her mother and possibly her father secretly blame her for it. So part of the estrangement with her parents has got to do with this issue. During the story, she meets a really fascinating Czechoslovakian widow, Sophia, who was about 50 years old or so, and she becomes very close, the two of them, and they share their stories and their upsets and the horrors, particularly Sophia, who was in Ravensbrück concentration camp during the war. And so it's a combination of this sort of almost World War II memory that Sophia has with the memory of the lost brother mixing in, and a few other things going on too. So this is a complicated book, but it's fairly simple in terms of its structure.
And you mentioned that this book has been quite a long time in the creation of it because it is loosely somewhat based on some of your own experiences. Can you talk about the initial inspiration for writing the book?
Well, you'll laugh, but I usually am not a procrastinator, but in this case, I really did procrastinate because when I was on St. Croix in 1966, at age 16, I had just read Lord of the Flies by William Golding, and I thought it would be really interesting to write a novel about people on an island, and particularly St. Croix, since I was physically there at the time. So I vowed that I would do this. So it only took me 56 years to accomplish. But I finally came back to it about, I don't know, maybe 8-10 years ago. And then I've been working on it back and forth ever since, and finally got it done. And it's, as a result, it's my favorite book, and it's sort of a nostalgic kind of novel for me in a way that other books haven't been.
I'm sure that there's probably somebody who has procrastinated longer, but you might be in line for some kind of award.
I think it's a record.
It is, but you stuck to it. You can say to your 16-year-old self that you fulfilled that promise. So that's awesome.
Yes. And I used my old notebooks, scrapbooks, and some photos and all kinds of weird things I had collected back then, from cocktail napkins to brochures and photographs I'd taken and notes I'd made in the scrapbook. So they were really handy. Plus, I was surprisingly good about my memories because I had a number of people who were residents then on St. Croix fact-checked me, and I was pretty much on the money. So I was really pleased with, the whole process.
That's very cool. So talk a little bit about the process of then taking this stepping stone of your own experience on the island and deciding that you wanted to write a novel set on that island, and then creating a fictional novel.
Well, there are some very closely autobiographical elements. I think that the main character, Olivia, is a little like I was at that point, and the woman that she meets the Czechoslovakian widow Sophia was based on someone that I got to know very well at that time. So I think I have pretty much followed some of the main characters that I knew then. And on the location, the Pink Fancy Hotel in Christiansted is the same one that I stayed in. So the evolution was pretty set. It wasn't a difficult novel to write from that point of view, but I had to do a lot of research on World War II and the Czechoslovakian experience and Ravensbrück concentration camp and a number of things like that. That did take time and effort.
Sure, that makes sense. Can you talk a little bit more about Olivia as the main character, and what about her do you think is going to resonate with readers?
I think she's a very interesting character. She's a solitary girl who is, as I said, has a lot of conflicts with her parents, and they aren't getting along at all. And so it's a difficult triangle that she's now in without her brother being present. And she's always felt like he was the more loved child. So that's another thing that Olivia carries with her. I think that anybody reading this book will identify with this mother-daughter relationship that's conflicted, and the whole process of trying to understand how someone at 16 fits in to the world and what her identity is, and how to differentiate herself from her parents, for example, which is always a very tense point in a girl's life at this stage.
Absolutely, yeah. And can you talk a little bit more about, because there's the relationship between Olivia and her mother, which is strained, and then Olivia and Sophia that is very different, but they're of a similar age. And so can you just talk a little bit about how those relationships work throughout the book?
Yeah, the mother is very self-involved. She's a beautiful, glamorous woman, and she winds up having an affair with the Pink Fancy hotel owner. And she's very involved with her artwork, with Travis, who is the owner, and she's still sort of hostile and angry towards her daughter, Olivia. So their relationship is really prickly. And Sophia comes in and really listens to Olivia and shows kindness and consideration and curiosity about her thoughts and her feelings and her emotions. In other words, just completely the opposite of how her parents behave, who are mostly oblivious to the pain and suffering she's going through. So Sophia is sort of a special character. I modeled her also a little, just on looks, on Simone Signoret as she got older, the French actress, in terms of her looks and her manner. So she's a wonderful character. I adored the woman it was based on, Elena, and every time I get to the end of this book, I still feel the same emotions about this Sophia character.
Time for the second break, but I love hearing the inspiration for characters when characters are based maybe on a real person or are a tribute to a real person. I think that's just such a wonderful way to honor someone's memory, when you kind of immortalize that memory in a book, even if it's not that exact person. So we'll be talking a little bit more about Elena, the person on whom Sophia, the character, is based, when we come back. Stay tuned. You're listening to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, and I will be right back.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Welcome back to the GSMC Book Review Podcast. I am speaking with author Laury A. Egan about her novel, Once Upon an Island. Before the break, she was talking about a woman that she met during her time on St. Croix. Her name was Elena, and she based the character of Sophia to a certain extent on Elena. So let's go ahead and return to that interview.
So it sounds like it's a bit of a tribute to the person that you modeled the character on.
Yes, very much so. And in fact, I acknowledge that in my notes because this character was really a fascinating character, and I know that the original woman, Elena, carried food to the Czechoslovakian soldiers who were resisting the Nazis. So she was involved to a certain extent. And so she did tell me that, but I always suspected that there was more to her story than she told me. And so as a result, I expanded her experience and had her caught and her family, hurt. And so this is part of the fictional element of the book that I think is very powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's fascinating to me when I think about it, and I think about your relationship with Elena. And, she didn't tell you everything, but just the fact that this was only 20 years after the war ended. And so you have that connection to her that you've brought forward with you. And so I'm not wording this well, but those connections to the past with the people that we have met, because not everyone is as familiar with that time period, of course, because they're younger now. And just the fact that you have that and are able to bring that forward through your life.
Yes, and also this is a portrait of an island that really affected me a great deal. This place is really unusual. If anybody has been there, they'll know what I mean. But it's got a rainforest on one end and a desert on the other. It has some of the most beautiful beaches. At that point, there was quite a bit of unrest in the island. There still is a little bit. So it was a very lush place to be, beautiful reefs right offshore. And I think I tried to capture the island itself as a character. And the people that have been buying the book on St. Croix have been really happy to see, my portrait of the island.
Yeah, the descriptions are great, but I also think it was a good move that you made. Olivia's mother, a painter, and Olivia, a photographer, so they presented the island, or they captured the island in different ways, and that was a good way to bring the descriptions of the island into the book in an organic kind of way. Yes, and my mother actually was working on a portfolio at the time, so that was accurate. And though I just had I don't know what kind of camera I had, but it was an amateur little camera. I later became a photographer, so I really think that, those two artistic people really were pretty accurately drawn. And as you say, it was really helpful because through their eyes, you could see a lot of things that maybe a lot of people would walk right past or wouldn't pick up on. Mm-hmm. Yeah. When it comes to writing the characters that you bring to life in your novels, do you tend to let that happen organically throughout the process, or do you have a really good vision of them beforehand, or is it a combination? Well, this book is different because it was based on quite a few people I knew at the time. In most cases, however, I would say it varies because sometimes those characters come to me almost like channeling. As in one case, I had a character. I was sitting on my deck minding my own business, and a young gay guy came
bounding in, and he wouldn't leave me alone until I sat down and started working on the book, which was a comedy, Fabulous. And this has happened to me several times before. So in those cases, oddly enough, and I don't understand this process at all, the characters really revealed themselves to me, and I just sort of, clung to their shirt tails as they went on. Other times, the characters were more a result of the situation that occurred in the plot, and so they sort of were organically developed. So it's sort of a combination of different things.
Okay. The young gay man who came to you fully formed is the reason that we had the first interview. That was the book we talked about the first time you were on the podcast.
Okay, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, fabulous.
You mentioned researching some for World War II. Were there other types of research that you needed to do for this story?
I had access through Facebook to a number of St. Croix groups, and so I put out a lot of questions to them, and they were just fantastic about responding. And so I was able to get some questions answered about details, but I got a lot right too. I mean, I even talk about Charlie, who was a Springer Spaniel at the Café de Paris in Christiansted, and later I have just met up with Charlie's owner, who was a magistrate judge and on St. Croix, and he was so tickled to read about his dog. So there were a lot of things that I had either from memory or from my notes. So that's been so much a great part of this book, is experiencing the reaction from people that were on St. Croix at the time, even though many of them have returned to the United States in the interim.
And time for the final break of the podcast. When we come back, Laury will be talking about what she is currently working on. So stay tuned. You're listening to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, and I'll be right back.
Golden State Media Concepts Sci-Fi Podcast. Together we dive into the world of sci-fi and science fiction. From episodes of Star Trek, Star Wars, to The Walking Dead, Resident Evil, all the hot new science fiction movies from the backdoors of Marvel or DC. The Golden State Media Concepts Sci-Fi Podcast. You'll never look at science fiction the same way again.
Welcome back to the GSMC Book Review Podcast and the conclusion of my interview with author Laury A. Egan.
You've had 4 books in the last couple of years, so you're not lacking for busyness, but what are you working on now, if I may ask?
Well, a book that's given me fits. It's called Jack and I, with an ampersand. Okay, Jack and I. And it is in the literary psychological suspense arena. I'm not sure quite how to typify it. It's about a boy who is in high school, and he has undiagnosed dissociative identity disorder. And he was abandoned as a 2-year-old at a hospital and has been in the foster care system ever since. So as it turns out, one of his primary alters, also called Jack, is more sociopathic, and he's become adversarial instead of helpful, which in cases of multiple personalities like this, usually the alter springs out because of a trauma and trying to sort of split off and disassociate the host or the primary person with dealing with the stress or the fears. That's where this alter takes over. In this case, that was the original reason, but now this alter has become really dangerous. He's sort of sociopathic. He's truant in school. He lies. He's very interruptive. And so this is a complicated book because it deals with not only the foster care system and the Division of Child and Family Services back in New Jersey during, I think it was 1980 to about 1996. But there are all kinds of other elements in this one. So it's a complicated little work. I'm on my 18th round and I'm still finding mistakes.
Wow, that is dedication. I hope that it all kind of falls into place for you soon.
I do too, because this is exhausting.
Yeah, I bet. What have you been reading when you take time to read for yourself?
Well, I've been doing some reviews for the New York Journal of Books, not the New York Review of Books, but this is a new entity that asked me to do some reviews. So I've been doing some literary books, but also quite a few in the thriller, suspense, psychological suspense arena. So I just finished a book by Preston and Child that I just finished literally last night. I've been reading a lot of Nordic noir authors who I really like a lot. It's been very refreshing to read about Iceland and various places. So I read it all over the map. I finished a Marguerite Duras novel, her second one, when she was in her mid-20s. The Easy Life, which was very interesting to read. I had only read The Lover way back. So I read different kinds of things.
And what's your favorite way to read? Are you a physical copy person, e-copy, Audible, or audiobook? Do you have a favorite?
I'm old-fashioned. I was a book designer for my career, so guess what? I like a book in my hand, although I have to say it's very, very frustrating because I look at each physical book as I did as a book designer.
Oh, I bet.
It's it's a very different world than I grew up with. But I am definitely a physical book person, and I keep thinking about getting an ebook reader. I haven't done it though, have I?
Do you ever find that to be a difficulty when your books are being brought to life in terms of your background with the book design, or has that not been an issue for you?
I designed over 1,500 books. I had lots of national awards, and I was trained by the very best typographers. My degree is in graphic design from Carnegie Mellon, and a lot of them have been really kind to let me either use one of my photographs and my designs on the cover, which Once Upon an Island is my design, but I found the photograph.
That has to be very different to come at it from the author side now. So yeah, interesting.
Yeah, because I was on the other side of the desk all my life, and to suddenly be, as the author, and so it's been frustrating.
Yeah.
I try to play nice, but
right. Interesting. Let's see. I know you have a website, so if you can share that as well as any social media where people can find you.
Okay, my website is www, and it's my full name, Laury A. Egan, Laury, Laury, then middle initial A, and then Egan, Egan. I'm also on Facebook and a bunch of other places. Amazon, I have my author's page. I am still on Twitter, though I am not sure if I'm going to stay there because of the situation on Twitter. And I have an Instagram account as well.
Perfect. Thank you. Laury, we've talked about a few different things today, but is there anything that we haven't covered that you would like to highlight at this point?
No, I think, I'm really proud of Once Upon an Island. This, of my 10 novels, this is my favorite by a easy margin. This is a really a story I really identify with a lot, and I hope readers do too. So far, that's been what I'm hearing, but these are people, the readers are often people that either know me or know of me, and so I don't know whether how everybody feels, but I really love this book, and I'd really recommend it. And if anybody's listening from St. Croix, it's in their local bookstore.
All right, wonderful. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you coming back to the podcast and talking to me about writing, and especially about Once Upon an Island.
Thank you so much, Sarah. It's great fun to talk to you.
Thank you once again to Laury for joining me to talk about Once Upon an Island, as well as some of her other books. I keep meaning to look and see how many authors have been on 3 times now. It's a handful. The number is growing, but I don't know off the top of my head. But this was Laury's 3rd time, and I am glad that she joined me again. It's always fun to have her on the podcast, see what genre she's writing in for the book that we talk about. It's always fun to see which direction we are going. If you are a fan of, first of all, books set on a tropical island in the mid-60s, that might be a good place to start. But no, this book is really about relationships. It's about the relationship between Olivia and her parents, mainly her mother. It's about the relationship, to a certain extent, between Olivia and her brother, because that impacted a lot of her life. It's half of her life since he died. And of course, her relationship with Sophia. Also, her mother's relationship with Travis. It's a lot about relationships, but it's also a coming of age story as Olivia learns to not only be in a relationship, but she discovers or explores her love of photography, the different lenses through which she sees the world, and how that changes as her perspective changes as she continues to grow throughout the novel. So if this is a book that interests you, then you should definitely check it out. I keep saying this, but it's December. It's the holidays. You may need to do holiday shopping. So this is maybe another book to put on your shopping list. You can't say I'm not giving you different genres. I mean, we went from horror to a book set in the mid-60s on a tropical island with a mother-daughter, with relationships, good, strong female relationships. And so you can't say I'm not giving you variety, in case you have eclectic readers in your life, or you yourself read a variety of different genres and topics and authors. At any rate, thank you so much to Laury. Thank you again to you, my listeners, for joining me for this episode. We have another returning author on the next episode. Carter Wilson will be joining me once again to talk about his newest novel. It's called The New Neighbor. And he was here on the first time he visited the podcast to talk about The Dead Husband. That's a novel, not... That's the title of a novel, The Dead Husband, and you'll have to tune in to find the connection between The Dead Husband and The New Neighbor. Not a sequel, they're both standalone novels, but there is a connection, so join me for that when I talk to Carter about The New Neighbor. In the meantime, if you are a fan of this podcast, as always, please do me the great honor, privilege, etc. of liking, subscribing, following on whatever platform you listen to the podcast on. That means you'll always get new episodes when they come out. Also, if you leave a review, very, very, very helpful. That could be my holiday present, my Christmas present. You could leave me a review. Written, starred, either way. Helps the podcast find other book lovers, so they can maybe find new authors and books that they love. And then also follow on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. Follow, comment, leave me a message. Whatever floats your boat. It all helps, and I do love hearing from listeners. So thank you very much in advance if you choose to do any of those things. And again, in the meantime, I hope you have a great weekend coming up. Whatever that weekend involves, maybe it's holiday shopping, maybe it's decorating, maybe it's holiday parties, maybe it is doing nothing that's social whatsoever. But regardless, I hope that somewhere amongst whatever you have planned, you schedule in plenty of time to get yourself lost in a good book. Thank you so much.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Book Review Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.GSMC.com. gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. From movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.